Hey everyone, it's Tom again. Thanks for joining me for this full build of the Tamiya Jordan 191 Formula 1 car. This was the machine Michael Schumacher made his debut in at the 1991 Belgium Grand Prix, and it's a great addition to my Michael Schumacher collection. The kit is semi-rare to find in decent condition, though they do pop up on eBay now and again. Being over 30 years old, it cost me around £70. The decals had yellowed with age, so I picked up replacements from Medium X Hobbies in Singapore, along with some carbon fibre decals for extra detail, though honestly I didn't get on with those at all. I started with the engine, carefully cutting parts from the sprue and cleaning them up with a sanding stick. Throughout the build I used Tamiya extra thin cement, and wherever possible I glued sub-assemblies together before painting. An F1 kit can look intimidating at first, but if you break it down into smaller sub-builds it becomes much more manageable. That's what I did with the engine. I also added a bit of quality control. After cutting and cleaning all the parts, I went back and checked each piece for missed seam lines, which of course there were a few of. Once I was happy, I mounted all the parts on a mix of lollipop sticks, cocktail sticks and alligator clips, then sprayed them with Mr. Surfacer 1500 Grey. I gave everything another once over before painting, just to catch any last imperfections. For paint I switched things up a bit and used Mr. Colour metal shades instead of the recommended Tamiya ones. Paint technology has come a long way in 30 years, so I wanted to take advantage of that. I did hit a snag though. I tried dry brushing the engine block and wasn't happy with it, so I stripped it using BioStrip, which is popular with wargamers. It's great for fixing mistakes, but don't leave it on for too long or it'll start melting the plastic. About 20 to 30 minutes does the job. Once back to bare plastic, I reprimed and painted it in iron and semi-gloss black, which looked far more accurate based on reference photos that I'd seen online. Next came some detailed painting and masking. I was especially pleased with the exhaust. First sprayed in super titanium, then masked and layered with metal brown and clear blue to give that heat stained look. I didn't get a photo of them on their own though, but you'll see them on the finished engine in a moment. At this point I also tried out those carbon fibre decals on the brake air ducts. Doing both sides took a couple of hours because of all the conforming and setting time, but once dried they look fantastic. After a bit of panel line wash with Tamiya's black accent colour and some assembly using AKCA magnet glue, the engine was complete. Next up was the cockpit. The seat had moulded in belts that didn't look great, so out came the Dremel. I removed them carefully and smoothed everything out with sanding paper. Most of the cockpit was painted in either X1 or XF1 black, so it was straightforward. The carbon fibre decals turned out to be too brittle here, so I used self-adhesive felt instead to mimic that old school racing seat texture. I tested it on a spoon first, and it looked a little out of scale, but a quick pass with a lighter gave it a nice finish. I also added some 3mm blue ribbon and leftover PE from my Ferrari F1 build for extra realism. Finally, the main bodywork. I started by cutting the parts from the sprue just away from the contact points to avoid stress marks, then came back for a closer trim. Like before, I built up sub-assemblies and sanded away ejection pin marks. For any gaps, especially under the cockpit, I used my homemade sprue goo, basically old Tamiya cement mixed with bits of sprue. It's not for everyone, but used carefully, it's really effective. After cleaning and rinsing everything in warm soapy water to remove dust and residue, I primed it all with Mr. Surfacer 1500 Grey. You'll notice I start spraying just off the part. That helps avoid spitting and gives a smoother, more even coat. To reduce dust, I also dampened some kitchen paper in the spray booth and gave the air a light misting. It really helps trap airborne dust if you haven't tried it before. The main body was painted with Zero Paint's dark green from the Jordan 191 pack. Since it's a hot paint, I built up light mist coats until coverage was even. Under no circumstances should you use wet coats here. It dries to a matte finish, which is expected. Once that's cured, I masked off the areas for the light blue, which is darker than you might think, but correct for this scheme. Any panels that were only going to be blue got a green base coat first, just to keep the tones consistent. Finally, I used light green on the front wing after some careful masking. Before applying the Zero Paints 2K Clear, I coated smaller parts like the floor and radiators with Tamiya X22. When working with 2K Clear, good ventilation is crucial. After spraying, make sure to clean your airbrush thoroughly and safely dispose of any used towels, gloves or filters. My setup's in the garage, so ventilation isn't an issue, especially with the door open during the summer months. If you're new to 2K or it's been a while, practice on a plastic spoon first. I did the same. I only filmed the first part because I didn't want to mess it up, but the key is to start with light mist coats. Let it dry about 5 minutes at around 20 degrees, then follow up with a wet coat. What you see when it's wet is pretty much how it will dry, so go for a smooth, even coat. I also doubled the thinner ratio this time, after learning from my Ferrari build where I had orange peel, and had no issues at all this time. For decals, I follow the same process I picked up from the Plastic Model Mojo podcast with Dr. Strangebush as a guest. I've put the method on screen if you want to pause and check it out. The sheet includes all the 1991 Grand Prix schemes, but this one's for Belgium. I did tear the 7up logo but managed to patch it up with some Vallejo white paint, and it's invisible on the final model. Once everything was set, I gave it a final clear coat. The tyres were next. I used a Dremel to wear them down and remove the seam lines. It's a small step but makes a big difference on an F1 model. The tyre logos were sprayed on using a stencil and XF2 white. After that, it was just a matter of putting it all together using the AK magnet glue. For a kit of its age, it went together beautifully. F1 cars from the 90s were much simpler, which makes these builds really enjoyable. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this build as much as I did. If you found it helpful or just liked the project, please consider giving it a like. It really helps out the channel. See you in the next build.